Good afternoon, fellow anti-novelists. This is Victoria with another installment of character development. Today we're going to talk about the G card, which is your character's misbelief about their world. So let's get right into it. I've started with a brief overview because what we're doing is we're developing the mental state, the emotional state of your main character. So up to this point, we've worked on Chad, who's a side character, but now we need to step into Tara because she's the main character, and I can walk you through her wound and her misbeliefs. So what's the cycle? The first thing that happens generally in childhood is some kind of wound. That wound leads to a misbelief or something that the character believes is true about the world but is not. That leads to symptoms. Those are the things that come out in your scenes that help you understand how to challenge your character to make them grow. That leads to the triumph, which ultimately leads them to the truth, which is how they learn what the world is really like around them, as opposed to how they thought it was. So let's break that down. Generally in childhood, they say up to about age 7, your views of the world are formed, and children tend to believe what they're told. So something happens in your character's past, could be childhood, could be young adulthood, that makes them believe a lie or a misbelief, either about life and the world or about themselves, or both. This is tricky territory because it can all be tied up together, but that's up to you, the writer, to determine. That lie or misbelief is then going to lead to symptoms in the character. It's going to give you scenes where you can demonstrate how they're playing out this misbelief about how things work and how they are functioning in the world. Then it's also going to allow you to challenge and confront the lie. It's that confrontation that leads you to the road to overcome whatever the lie is, and that completes your character arc, which leads ultimately to truth. So let's talk about how this gets done. But first, how cool is this little clipboard? It fits a 4x6 card perfectly, allows you to write on it and do your work, and the card doesn't move because it's clipped on. Super cool. So let's look at Tara. Tara Kaler is my 7110 card. So we're going to go to her situation. What is Tara's wound? Well, first off, we know that as a child, her dad left. Now, she doesn't know why. She just knows that he's not in the picture and hasn't been since she was a child, other than sending money to help take care of her mother, which is a little weird. So her mother is in an institution. But again, she doesn't know the details about this, so that's one of the things that she's going to have to discover. As a result of having essentially lost both of her parents, she's obviously going to have trust issues, okay? And those are going to manifest primarily with men. So we've got all kinds of cool character stuff that we can do with her in that regard. But she's also going to feel a little lost, like she doesn't believe that her life has a heading. And so as we start to develop how she approaches that and what she does in her life, that's going to bring us to the /2 card, whereas this is the /1 card. Variations of the misbelief. So let's just brainstorm here for a second. How could a misbelief based on having lost your parents manifest? Well, number one, we've already said trust, okay? Number two, she could have trouble building relationships. All right, so what you're doing now is you're coming up with how this lie or misbelief plays out for your character. She could certainly live a solitary life and basically engineer smallness, engineer solitude in her life, which she has certainly done because she essentially marries herself to her museum work and doesn't pursue relationships. So that's a huge key that's going to help me determine what I need to throw at her in order to challenge her in the story. So you can continue looking at different variations of this lie and start to figure out what kind of other characters can you bring into this character's life in order to challenge them and push them outside of this little comfort zone that they've created for themselves. Ideally, you want to confront them and make them go outside of that comfort zone so that they can start to experiment and figure out how to get to the actual truth. On the /3 card, I've just listed symptoms. So we've talked about that a little bit under the variations, but here's where you would list symptoms of the lie. So ultimately, she's lonely, right? She's engineered solitude in her life. She feels unfulfilled. Or maybe she feels like she's destined for something better, but she doesn't know how to get to that greatness. Okay, so start filling out, get really down into the weeds with your character and see what do those symptoms look like. Okay, so that's the wound that's created a misbelief about the world that has manifested in symptoms which make this character act the way that they do. So in the next installment, we'll break that down a little bit further and we'll start to plot it into the rest of the character development. So I hope this was helpful. Get yourself a miniature clipboard because they rock, and I will see you next time.